Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shay. If you're new here, hello, welcome. Today is day 4 of working with Miss Penny. She's my Mustang from Red Rock Lakes, California. I'm training her for the Sacramento Tip Challenge 2022. And I basically started off, I think there's 2 different sessions in this video, getting a little bit of lunging going, getting her to understand trotting and stopping. And once again, the gate is open. Eventually, I do figure it out, but that's down the road. And I think I discussed a little bit in the last video. I can't totally remember. But I worry a little bit about how much impulsion I was asking from her. She's not a horse that is very driven, so I feel like I was almost just asking too much of her in the very beginning. Right there, I wanted her to turn more into me, and she just kind of stopped and wasn't really giving me her eyes or her ears, so I wanted to just keep asking her until she stopped and kind of looked towards me. You can see she's still a little bit hesitant when it comes to me walking up, but she is a little bit more willing than she was, obviously, than on day 1 to let me touch her. We just worked a little bit more on petting on both sides. Right here, I just kind of pulled a little bit on the halter, see what she would do. She did kind of give me a little bit, couple steps forward, not very much. I really wasn't that concerned about it. I mostly was starting to kind of touch over her face a little bit more, touch around her halter more to see if I could get that halter off that day. The nice thing, even though I did have my hand on the halter and she kind of pulled away, she didn't pull away hard. She's always been pretty good about yielding to pressure. She doesn't pull very hard away from me, which is super nice. You can see that she still kind of turns her head away from me when I'm walking up to her. And she doesn't do that anymore, but it was something that we really struggled with for the first few days. And I think that honestly just the fact that she's wild and she's tolerating me coming up to her, but she doesn't necessarily want me coming up to her. Here I'm just starting to get her used to a little bit of pull pressure, so I would put my hand kind of up by her halter, put a little bit of pressure, and when she would drop her head and give, that's when I would kind of back off. And it's really not like I'm putting a ton of pressure on her pole. It's literally just like my hand is up there and I'll slowly apply a little bit more pressure until she gives and then I let go. Again, I'm working on a little bit of that downward pressure, but this time using the halter. This is something I wanted to work on from the very beginning, just to get her to drop her head a little bit easier. That little bit of leading really wasn't too bad. I remember at this point, I definitely was like, I want you to be walking up next to me, but, and that's where you'll see coming up here, I definitely think that I pushed her too hard as far as staying up right next to me. Right here, I'm just letting her kind of investigate what the whip is. She ends up trying to eat it, which is pretty much how she interacts with everything that is slightly scary. She wants to try to eat it, which is great. Here I'm just kind of testing her boundaries. I'm just trying to see kind of what's going to be scary for her as far as contact. At this point, I'd pretty much touched her all over, so I wasn't too concerned, but I just wanted to make sure she was cool with the whip. Here is where I was talking about I wanted her to walk right next to me, and I think it was just a little bit too early for her for me to already be asking that. She didn't totally understand the concept of leading just yet. She did a little bit, but not great. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to her to stay right next to me, especially if I'm not a person that she entirely trusts yet. Basically, any sort of small step that she took forward, I wanted to praise. So she kind of stepped forward there, kind of stepped sideways, and that's partially just because I wasn't watching her, so that kind of sucked. To be honest, I kind of wish, looking at it now, that I didn't use the whip, because I just don't know that it was totally necessary for her. Here, I kind of gave up on the idea of her being right next to me finally because I just wanted to get some steps forward. So it might look like I'm pulling pretty hard. I'm really not. I'm just kind of applying some steady pressure until she does step forward and it loosens up a little bit. Every once in a while, I kind of change directions just to not be so monotonous with what we're doing. You can hear Sage talk in the background. This is now the second session of the day. This is more in the afternoon. You guys might hear Maddox in this clip. He was definitely talking. It's not like it was crazy hot or anything outside. He just was over being outside. So I tried to get done as quickly as possible.
I smell like Taco Bell. Do you like quesadillas? Does it smell like a quesadilla? What's your cookies? You're a cute girl. Hi. Good. Good girl. Come here.
Right there was a really nice little step forward with how our kind of leading was going earlier in the day. It was nice to just put a slight bit of pressure on the lead rope and have her still willing to step forward. A little bit less of a head turn, so I was really excited about that. You can see her get a little bit tense. And then I'm dumb. I flick it and she's like, no. So
Sage, you're not helpful.
I don't remember what Sage did. She did something dumb in her pasture.
Sage, you need to stop. Just, you're the best at stop it. Hey. Well, don't do that either. Good.
That was one of the first few times that we asked for a back at all, so I was excited about any sort of steps that she took. She wasn't totally used to that pressure on her noseband, so anything little was great. I also just worked a little bit on getting her mane kind of cleaned up. Within the first few days, I wanted to have it braided to hopefully help maintain it a little bit. It definitely was flopping onto the other side at one point and then back on the other side. It was a whole hot mess. So I wanted to get it braided on one side. Here I'm asking for her to just pick up her feet, and she actually does pretty well. Despite this being something that's pretty dang new for her, I actually don't know if we ever did this in the previous videos or if this was the first time. But She did pretty well when it came to picking it up. I wanted to kind of slap that foot too, make some different noises, make sure she was cool with that.
Sorry, sorry. No, I was moving fast. You know, tell us on the ground. Oh. Good girl.
It was a very nice pickup. Unfortunately, with the way that she kind of slammed her foot down and then I moved too quickly, she just spooked a little bit. So I cut all this clip out because it took me a bit to get in there and walk her back out. But I just walked in there, grabbed her, and walked back to the middle of the pen. Here, I'm finally smart enough to close the gate.
Alright, Philly. Let's try that foot again, okay? Hey, Mama. Whoa.
I think she was standing on the lead rope here, but I don't really remember. But for not knowing anything when it comes to a backup, she did pretty frickin' well. So again, I'm just gonna kind of ask her to pick up her foot. She's already not a fan of it, so we're just gonna take it slow. I just ask her to stand, nice and quiet. And here I'm asking for that down movement since she's done it a couple of times. I want her to, when she starts to get a little bit hot-headed, to remember to bring her head back down and just kind of create that as almost a relaxing thing, if that makes sense. The nice thing with that first foot is I could not hold onto the lead rope and she stood just fine. But even on this time, she wasn't bad with picking it up either, so.
Hey. Hey.
I don't remember what Sage was freaking out for.
What are you doing? Don't be dumb. Hey, can you smile? Yeah, that's a good smile. Good girl. What are you freaking out for? Put your tail down. You're not narrow.
We also worked on a little bit more of a tail brushing because I really wanted to get that braided. She definitely didn't want to stand very still, and you could see that the lead rope kind of got caught up in her foot. And I think this happened in another video too, but basically I don't apply I don't apply a ton of pressure where it's dangerous, but I want her to figure out that when things are around her feet, it's not scary. So when she kind of gives her head and relaxes a little bit more, that's when I give the lead rope back. Just to teach them that, hey, things around your feet is not a big deal.
Good girl. That was very good.
At this point, we really started working on touching around her face, around the halter. I had a goal by the end of the day. I wanted to have the halter off. So if I couldn't get it in that first session, I wanted to do it on this one. And you can tell she's already a billion times better than day one of trying to let me touch her face, touch her forehead, touch her nose. She really was starting to come around to it. The biggest thing, and still to this day, her nose and underneath her chin and jaw are something that are just super sensitive for her. I don't know what it is, but she does not love any sort of physical contact with either of those areas. Right there, I just kind of held my hand over her nose. I wasn't really applying pressure, but I just put my hand on her nose, and once she kind of settled back down, then I gave that release. I didn't want to let go with my hand and then her be like, oh, cool, you let go as soon as I freaked out. And since I was wanting to take the halter off, I wanted to make sure that she would kind of lead by a lead rope around her neck, which she did a little bit. It definitely wasn't the cleanest, but it was something, just in case I couldn't get the halter back on. So before this clip happened, I actually had like undone the halter a couple of times and redone it just with the clip to make sure that she wouldn't care about any of the sounds that it made or the feeling of it. This was the first time though of actually getting the halter off. At this point, I basically wanted to teach her that the halter wasn't a bad thing. I would walk up to her and just kind of let her sniff the halter, and if she dropped her head down, that was good, and I would back off. I really wanted to get her to the point that she would kind of not necessarily self halter, but I wanted her to drop her head down. At this point, she was just starting to just kind of walk away. So I was like, okay, we're going to disengage, we're going to do something else, and hence why I'm just kind of lunging her. But you can really see here the kind of lack of impulsion from her. I really didn't want her to turn the opposite direction. And she just stands here. So she does finally trot off a little bit, but I want her to turn into me. Just like that. And when she makes these nice smooth turns, I definitely want to let her know that's exactly what I wanted. And when she turns outside away from me, I chase her back in the same direction we were just going and try again to get her to stop and face me. This looks like a lot rewatching it, but it's really not a big deal at all, and it's the best way that I've found to get them to understand that they should be turning into you and not facing away from you. And after we kind of have our moment of freak out in the pen and lunging whatever, I want to make sure that I walk up to her and we do lots of praise and pets so that she knows that I'm not there as this heavy stimulation all the time. Like I could still be a place of relaxation for her. So a little bit of touch to the halter. I want her to get her head down just a little bit more. She had put her nose kind of along the nose band, so I wanted to just praise that and then move on. There, I got it kind of up on her nose for the first time and wanted to just hold it there so there was a little bit of pressure and let her stand so that she understood fully that getting the halter on is not a scary thing. I don't want her to be partially attached to something where she can't necessarily get away from it either. So here I just kind of wiggle the halter back and forth, get her used to a little bit of the movement, and then praise back off. So this is the first time of actually haltering her, which I was super excited about. So I felt confident in the fact that I could let go and take that halter off at the end of the day and be able to put it back on without any issues.
Good girl. That was so good.
So that is pretty much the end of the video. I'm going to let it kind of ride out. But this was day 4 of working with Miss Penny. She has just been an absolute dream to work with. We are a couple months into this and about a month away from the competition. So make sure you guys stay tuned. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.
Good. Yes, good girl. I think we're going to call that quits because that was